The Mediterranean sun blazed over the city of Alexandria as Cleopatra stood on the balcony of her palace, her gaze fixed westward. Below, the sprawling city pulsed with life. Fishermen hauled in their catches at the bustling harbor, while traders haggled over exotic wares from distant lands. Columns of smoke from cooking fires spiraled upward, mingling with the salty tang of the sea breeze. Beyond the city, the shimmering expanse of the Mediterranean stretched to the horizon, a pathway to the world she intended to reshape. Cleopatra's eyes narrowed, her thoughts consumed by the possibilities that lay across those waters, where her ambitions awaited realization. Below, the bustling city moved like a living organism. Merchants hawked their goods, scholars debated in shaded corners, and soldiers trained with disciplined precision. The air carried a mixture of sea salt and incense, a reminder of the city's power as a nexus of trade and culture. The marble walls of the palace shimmered in the golden light, their carvings depicting the victories and gods of Egypt, a testament to the enduring might of Cleopatra's lineage. Beside her stood Mark Antony, the Roman general whose allegiance had turned the tides of war. His armor glinted in the sunlight, though the man within looked wearied, his brow furrowed with thoughts unspoken. Rome's legions had clashed with Egypt's forces at Actium, but it was Cleopatra's cunning strategy that secured their triumph. She capitalized on her deep understanding of naval warfare, positioning her fleet to exploit the shifting Mediterranean currents and trap the Roman ships in a vulnerable crescent. Cleopatra's commanders executed a series of coordinated strikes, cutting off Octavian's supply lines and forcing his forces into desperation. Meanwhile, Cleopatra's spies in Octavian's camp fed her critical intelligence, allowing her to anticipate his moves and counter them effectively. The culmination of these efforts saw Octavian's forces crumble under the weight of superior strategy and relentless precision. Her fleet, aided by her brilliant naval commanders and knowledge of Mediterranean tides, had split the Roman armada, forcing them into disarray. Her wealth, a seemingly endless river of gold, had bought the loyalty of senators disillusioned by Octavian's relentless ambition and cruelty. Among them was Lucius Cornelius Balbus, a former advisor to Caesar whose influence swayed entire factions within the Senate. Cleopatra's envoys also secured the allegiance of Quintus Aelius Tibero, who controlled critical supply lines to Rome's armies. These alliances, forged through a mix of opulent gifts and promises of shared power, became the foundation of her political strategy, tilting the balance of influence in her favor. Cleopatra's coffers financed extravagant feasts and bribes that swayed key figures, including the influential Senator Lucius Cornelius Balbus. His defection provided critical support, shifting alliances in her favor and ensuring crucial votes that stymied Octavian's legislative efforts. Now, the two stood on the cusp of a new era. Cleopatra's eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the horizon as if the future itself lay hidden just beyond the shimmering waves. She imagined fleets of Egyptian and Roman ships sailing together, uniting the Mediterranean under one banner. The bustling markets of Alexandria would stretch into Rome, their goods intertwining cultures and wealth. Her vision extended further, to temples that merged Roman and Egyptian deities, a pantheon representing unity. The horizon held not just waves but the promise of an empire bound by shared prosperity and strength. Rome was hers, not through brute force alone but through alliances, manipulation, and an unrelenting vision of unity. The eagle and the cobra, she murmured, a faint smile on her lips. Her voice carried both confidence and an edge of mystery, as though she had already foreseen the empire they would build together. Together they will rule the world. Antony turned to her, his expression unreadable. Despite his Roman pride, there was an undeniable respect, and perhaps a hint of fear, in his gaze. Rome will not accept this union easily, he said, his tone heavy with the weight of his homeland's stubborn traditions. You may hold its cities, but its people, they will bend. Cleopatra interrupted, her voice sharp and unyielding. She turned to face him fully, her eyes locking onto his with the intensity of a queen who had seen the impossible made real. They always do. The legions follow their leaders. The people follow their gods. And Rome will learn to follow me. Antony hesitated for a moment, but there was no arguing with the force of her conviction. Cleopatra had not merely conquered Rome, she had captured its soul, binding its fate with her own. The wind carried their silence, mingling with the distant sounds of Alexandria's life, a city poised to shape the course of history. The transition was tumultuous, a storm of change sweeping through the streets of Rome as Cleopatra entered not as a conqueror but as an empress. The cobblestone avenues were adorned with statues and frescoes bearing her likeness beside Roman gods, a calculated gesture designed to intertwine Egyptian divinity with Roman tradition. Citizens reacted with a mix of awe and uncertainty. Many marveled at the intricate craftsmanship, seeing Cleopatra as a symbol of unity and prosperity. Merchants praised her for the booming trade her rule brought, while devout traditionalists whispered their discontent, claiming the fusion of deities diluted Rome's sacred heritage. Public squares buzzed with debates, some celebrating the new era of cultural integration, others mourning what they perceived as the erosion of Roman identity. The statues depicted Cleopatra as Isis, draped in regal robes, standing beside Mars, the god of war, symbolizing strength through unity. Frescoes on public buildings showed scenes of Egyptian pharaohs and Roman generals sharing triumphs, their victories merging into a single narrative. Citizens paused to marvel at the artwork, some captivated by its beauty and the promise of harmony it represented, while others whispered discontent, seeing it as an encroachment on Roman heritage. The people marveled at the spectacle, yet many whispered their unease. To some, Cleopatra was a savior, to others, a foreigner trespassing on Rome's sacred soil. Cleopatra's first decree was bold and unprecedented, the merging of Roman and Egyptian councils into a single governing body. Senators balked at the idea, their voices rising in anger during heated assemblies. An insult to Rome's sovereignty, they cried. But Cleopatra's silver tongue quelled the storm, promising wealth and stability to the plebeians. Her charisma won their favor, for they saw opportunity in her grand vision. The markets buzzed with new trade, and streets once marred by poverty began to thrive under her reforms. Her second act was to overhaul Rome's fractured military. Egyptian innovations, from chariot-mounted archers to advanced siege tactics, were integrated into Roman discipline, creating a hybrid force unmatched in speed and lethality. This hybrid force proved its might at the Battle of Syracuse, where chariot-mounted archers outmaneuvered Octavian's cavalry, cutting through their ranks with precision. In the siege of Massilia, advanced Egyptian engineering dismantled the city's defenses in days, securing a swift victory. Each triumph solidified Cleopatra's dominance, showcasing the unparalleled effectiveness of this united military strategy. Cleopatra's generals, fiercely loyal, ensured her legions were stationed strategically, securing Egypt's borders while fortifying key Mediterranean trade routes. The wealth of the Nile flowed unimpeded into Roman granaries, fueling both armies and people alike. Yet Cleopatra's efforts faced mounting resistance. Octavian, exiled and plotting in distant lands, sowed seeds of dissent, his agents whispering tales of Cleopatra's ambitions to reshape Rome into an Egyptian state. Within the Senate, discontent simmered as patrician families bristled under her influence. Even Antony, her steadfast ally, began to struggle with the weight of his divided loyalties. "Do you not see?" Antony said one night, pacing the length of their lavish chambers. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by the flickering light of oil lamps. "They will never see you as one of their own. Rome will never truly bow to Egypt." Cleopatra, reclining on silk-draped cushions, regarded him with a steady gaze. Her golden jewelry caught the light, gleaming like the treasures of her empire. "And yet they bow," she replied, her tone calm but unyielding. "The legions march for me. The Nile flows into their granaries. Rome's future lies in unity, not division." Antony stopped mid-stride, his expression conflicted. He could not deny her words, yet the weight of Roman pride bore heavily on him. Cleopatra watched him in silence, her gaze unwavering. To her, Antony's doubt was a symptom of Rome's unwillingness to embrace the inevitable. Unity would come, she thought, whether by alliance or by force. Under Cleopatra's reign, a new Rome began to take shape. Governance saw a dramatic shift as Cleopatra merged Egyptian bureaucratic precision with Roman republican traditions. She introduced detailed land surveys and census records, ensuring equitable tax distribution and minimizing corruption. Local magistrates adopted Egypt's practice of recording legal proceedings, which brought consistency and transparency to the justice system. By implementing efficient grain storage and distribution protocols, Cleopatra mitigated famine risks, turning Rome's granaries into models of reliability and order. These reforms not only stabilized governance but also won the support of common citizens who benefited from the newfound efficiency. Provincial governors adopted Egyptian record-keeping systems, streamlining taxation and reducing corruption. Urban planning took inspiration from Alexandria, with sprawling marketplaces and centralized forums connecting Roman districts. Public works flourished. Temples rose blending Egyptian and Roman architectural motifs, with towering columns adorned with hieroglyphs alongside Roman friezes depicting victories and gods. Egyptian obelisks flanked Roman arches, symbolizing the unity of two great civilizations. Aqueducts expanded to accommodate Egypt's growing influence, incorporating intricate carvings of the Nile's flora and fauna into their design. Roads became arteries of trade and culture, lined with statues of pharaohs and Roman emperors standing side by side, each proclaiming the harmony of a shared empire. Festivals celebrating both Roman and Egyptian gods unified citizens, showcasing the cultural fusion through grand parades and rituals. Streets were adorned with banners bearing symbols of both pantheons, and altars were erected to honor deities from both traditions. Ceremonies included processions where Roman senators and Egyptian priests walked side by side, carrying offerings of grain, wine, and incense. Performers reenacted myths from both cultures, blending them into shared narratives that captivated audiences. These events not only celebrated unity but also gave citizens a tangible connection to the shared identity Cleopatra envisioned, forging bonds across cultural divides. The daily life of its citizens evolved, with Egyptian rituals influencing Roman customs. Roman households adopted the Egyptian practice of honoring household gods with daily offerings of bread and wine, a ritual once reserved for formal temples. Festivals celebrating the flood cycle of the Nile began to feature prominently, symbolizing renewal and abundance in urban life. Roman women embraced Egyptian cosmetics and perfumes, blending them into their own grooming traditions. Even the Roman calendar saw changes, incorporating Egyptian lunar events that aligned agricultural practices across the empire. Markets showcased exotic goods from the Nile, from papyrus scrolls to spices, blending Egyptian luxury with Roman practicality. Public governance shifted as Cleopatra introduced bureaucratic practices from Egypt, streamlining tax collection and civic management. Her influence reached the education system, with schools teaching a curriculum that included Egyptian philosophy and mathematics alongside Roman traditions. The city itself transformed, as grand temples combining the architectural styles of both cultures rose, their intricate carvings depicting a fusion of Roman gods and Egyptian deities. The streets buzzed with a sense of renewal, though whispers of dissent lingered in shadowed alleys. Egyptian architecture graced the forum. Roman aqueducts brought water to the sands of the Sahara. The great library of Alexandria expanded with scrolls from conquered territories, creating the largest repository of knowledge the world had ever seen. Among these were mathematical treatises from Greek scholars, agricultural records from Mesopotamia, and medical texts from India, each offering insights that pushed the boundaries of existing knowledge. These additions not only preserved the wisdom of conquered cultures but also served as a foundation for innovation, allowing scholars to synthesize ideas across disciplines. The library became a beacon of intellectual fusion, symbolizing the unification of diverse civilizations under Cleopatra's reign. The common people thrived under the queen's reforms. Trade flourished, and the wealth of the empire grew. Festivals celebrated both Roman and Egyptian gods, bridging the cultural divide. Cleopatra's vision seemed to be taking root. But beneath the surface, dissent simmered. The patrician families resented the influx of Egyptian influence, seeing it as an affront to their heritage. Senators plotted in shadows, their allegiance to Cleopatra fragile at best. Even Antony, once her fiercest ally, grew distant. It was Antony who struck the first blow. Torn between his Roman identity and his loyalty to Cleopatra, He wrestled with the expectations of his upbringing and the ideals instilled by Rome. Honor and duty, pillars of Roman philosophy, demanded unwavering allegiance to the Republic, yet his heart pulled him toward Cleopatra's vision of unity and power. The ideals of Roman stoicism, discipline, and the supremacy of the Republic clashed violently with the allure of her ambition and the personal loyalty he felt. Antony found himself questioning whether his actions served Rome's legacy or merely prolonged its stagnation, a doubt that gnawed at his resolve. Senators preyed on his doubts, reminding him of his duty to the Republic and the shame of his perceived betrayal. Whispers of Cleopatra's growing influence as a threat to Roman tradition compounded his guilt. In secret meetings, the senators painted a vision of Rome restored to its former glory, free from foreign rule, pushing Antony to make the pact that would seal Cleopatra's fate. Their plan was to usurp Cleopatra's authority, restoring Rome to its traditional hierarchy. The betrayal came during the Saturnalia festival, when Cleopatra had invited her closest advisors and allies to a lavish feast. The festival, a time of revelry and reversal of roles, provided the perfect cover for treachery. Traditionally, Saturnalia was a moment when hierarchies were upended, and Antony's conspirators exploited this atmosphere of chaos and indulgence to mask their clandestine plans. As Cleopatra's guests toasted to unity and prosperity, Antony's absence gained sinister significance, the joyous occasion becoming the backdrop for his calculated betrayal. The palace glittered with golden candelabras, their flames reflecting off polished marble walls. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted meats, honeyed dates, and spiced wine. Musicians played haunting melodies on lyres and flutes, their notes weaving through the laughter and chatter of the guests. Servants moved with practiced grace, balancing silver platters laden with exotic delicacies from across the empire. Amidst the opulence, Antony's absence felt like a shadow creeping across the festivities, unnoticed by most but impossible for Cleopatra to ignore. As music filled the air and torches lit the night, Antony slipped away to meet his conspirators. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, as though the very palace sought to hold him back. His mind raced with conflicting thoughts, the memories of Cleopatra's unwavering gaze, the laughter of her court, and the weight of Roman duty that gnawed at his resolve. The muffled sound of revelry faded behind him, replaced by the hushed murmurs of the conspirators waiting in the shadows. Antony hesitated at the threshold, his hand brushing against the cold stone wall, before steeling himself to step forward into betrayal. His absence did not go unnoticed. Cleopatra, ever vigilant, confronted him in the palace gardens later that night. The garden's tranquil beauty belied the storm brewing within her. Her heart pounded with anger and betrayal, each step she took crunching against the gravel path. She clutched the folds of her silk robe, her nails digging into the fabric as her thoughts raced. Had she miscalculated, trusted too deeply, or underestimated the pull of Rome on Antony's soul? Her breath came shallow, the cool night air doing little to temper the fire in her chest. Every flicker of the torchlight seemed to cast Antony's shadow larger, darker, a specter of the choices that had led them here. The garden was cloaked in shadows, illuminated only by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the latticework of vines. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the cool night air, mingling with the distant murmur of Alexandria's streets. Torches flickered along the stone paths, casting erratic shadows on the towering palms and marble statues of Egyptian deities. The faint sound of a fountain trickling nearby only heightened the tension, each droplet echoing in the charged silence as Cleopatra stepped forward, her eyes glinting with accusation. The torches cast flickering shadows across their faces as she demanded the truth. "You've made your choice, haven't you?" she said, her voice cold. Antony hesitated, his shoulders slumping under an invisible weight. His gaze flickered between Cleopatra's piercing eyes and the ground, as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm of emotions within him, regret, fear, and an overwhelming sense of failure. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came, only the soft exhale of someone wrestling with impossible choices. The weight of his guilt was clear, etched in every movement, every labored breath, as he struggled to face the consequences of his betrayal. "Rome is my blood, Cleopatra," I cannot betray it, even for you. His voice wavered, the weight of his words pulling at him. I was born to serve its ideals, to uphold its traditions. Every step I've taken with you, I've felt the pull of my homeland, as though every stone in its streets calls my name. He looked away, his fists clenched. But that doesn't mean this is easy. You've made me question everything, yet Rome is who I am. Her gaze hardened, but her voice softened. Then you betray yourself. And all that we have built. Antony's betrayal set off a chain of events that unraveled Cleopatra's reign. His secret pact emboldened discontented senators, who swiftly mobilized their factions to undermine Cleopatra's authority. They spread incendiary propaganda, painting Cleopatra as a tyrant intent on erasing Roman traditions. Within the Senate, they orchestrated key votes to block her reforms, creating a gridlock that weakened her governance. Discontented senators also leveraged their influence over regional governors, encouraging uprisings and withholding critical resources from Cleopatra's administration. These coordinated actions fractured her power base and sowed chaos throughout the empire. The once loyal provinces of the empire hesitated, their allegiances swayed by rumors of instability. In Gaul, whispers spread of Cleopatra planning to replace local leaders with Egyptian governors, stoking fears of cultural erasure. Meanwhile, in Hispania, merchants claimed that Egyptian taxes would cripple regional trade, prompting resistance among influential trading guilds. These rumors, though unfounded, gained traction through Octavian's agents, who fanned the flames of dissent, further fracturing the empire's fragile unity. Key allies like Lucius Cornelius Balbus withdrew support, forcing Cleopatra to realign her strategies under mounting pressure. Octavian seized the opportunity, returning to Rome with promises to restore its honor. He vowed to end the chaos sown by foreign influence, and reclaim Rome's traditional values. In fiery speeches before the Senate and the people, he pledged to restore the Republic's integrity, reduce taxes, and bring stability to a fractured empire. His words resonated deeply with the Roman populace, who yearned for order amidst the turmoil. Senators, eager to reassert their authority, rallied behind Octavian's vision of a purified Rome, bolstering his power and setting the stage for his ultimate victory. Cleopatra's forces, stretched thin and betrayed from within, struggled to maintain control as her enemies consolidated power and pressed their advantage on every front. Her generals employed guerrilla tactics in the dense forests of Gaul, attempting to disrupt supply lines, while her navy waged relentless battles along the Mediterranean, aiming to safeguard vital trade routes. In the east, Cleopatra personally led negotiations with local tribes, securing fleeting alliances to bolster her ranks. Despite these efforts, Octavian's forces, unified and well-supplied, systematically dismantled her defenses, exploiting every weakness in her divided empire. The conspirators rallied their forces, and Octavian seized the opportunity to return to Rome, claiming to restore its honor. Civil war erupted once more, this time pitting Cleopatra's loyalists against Antony's faction. The battles were brutal. Cleopatra led her armies with unmatched determination, often riding at the front lines to inspire her troops. At the siege of Alexandria, she stood atop the battlements, directing volleys of arrows and ordering defensive maneuvers as Octavian's forces advanced. In a desperate naval clash, she commanded her flagship with precision, rallying her fleet to breach an enemy blockade. Despite her unyielding resolve, the sheer number of Octavian's troops overwhelmed her stretched forces, turning each victory into a fleeting respite. Her leadership shone brightest in these moments of adversity, but the cracks in her empire grew impossible to mend. One by one, the territories she had united began to fracture, their loyalty wavering in the chaos. In the end, it was not an external force but the betrayal within that brought Cleopatra's dream to ruin. As her armies fell, she retreated to Alexandria, her once unassailable capital now vulnerable. Cleopatra stood in her chambers, the sound of distant battles echoing through the city. The room was dimly lit, the flickering glow of oil lamps casting wavering shadows across richly embroidered tapestries depicting scenes of Egypt's past glories. An ornate desk cluttered with maps and letters lay abandoned, symbols of plans that had crumbled. A half-drained goblet of wine sat atop a carved ivory table beside her, forgotten in the chaos of the moment. The faint scent of myrrh hung in the air, mingling with the distant acrid tang of smoke seeping through the windows. Cleopatra's hands tightened around the edges of her golden robe, her knuckles white with tension as she gazed toward the horizon, her mind racing through the choices that remained. She held a golden asp, its venom a swift and certain end. Her fingers trembled as she traced the intricate patterns etched into its golden scales, her mind swirling with memories of triumphs and betrayals. The weight of the asp in her hand felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the burden of all her unfulfilled dreams. She thought of her children, their futures now shrouded in uncertainty, and of Antony, whose absence hollowed the chambers of her heart. Each breath came slower, her resolve hardening with the realization that in this final act, she would deny Octavian the satisfaction of parading her as a trophy of his conquest. The weight of her failures bore down on her. Rome was lost, and Egypt would not survive without it. She thought of the treaties she failed to secure, alliances she had watched disintegrate under the pressure of Octavian's relentless propaganda. The defeat at Alexandria lingered in her mind, a reminder of the forces she had underestimated and the spies who had turned against her. Each failure felt like a crack in the foundation of her empire, the dreams of unity and prosperity now distant shadows of what could have been. Antony was gone, slain in battle. Cleopatra had learned the news from a bloodied messenger, his voice trembling as he recounted Antony's final stand. Surrounded and outnumbered, Antony had fought with a ferocity born of desperation, his sword carving through the enemy ranks until exhaustion overtook him. Cleopatra's reaction had been a tempest of grief and rage, her cries echoing through the palace halls as she struck down the goblet in her hand, its contents spilling like the life that had slipped from Antony's veins. The weight of his death settled upon her like a shroud, leaving her hollow and resolute in her final defiance of Octavian.